Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I am your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how was your Monday?
Dragged. It really dragged. I did something that I don't usually do, which is have caffeine in the afternoon. Not because I think it has like a big effect on me, like physiologically, but because
Sure.
I get it in my head that it will. And so I like manifest, I'm going to be up all night. So I had one of those though, and I'm not going to lie, it was divine. Got me to the finish line, but then now knowing I have to come sit here and talk about another Locomotive loss is a little rough, but that's okay. How was your Monday, Phil?
So when I tell you a miracle happened today,
Oh,
this is not a joke.
it's not a drill.
I I woke up this morning and I had one of those moments where, you know, when you were in school and you have an assignment due and you wake up the morning of and you're like, oh shit, that's due today.
Yes.
I had that moment of I have a monthly review basically with my boss that I prep slides for and all this stuff.
Wow.
Had not done it.
Oh no.
I had this thought last week of, I'll take a little time this weekend. It'll only be an hour or two over the whole weekend. That won't take me any time. Didn't do it at all. So this morning I am scrambling. I am in full scramble mode. I'm putting stuff together with, the PowerPoint equivalent of duct tape and bubble gum and freaking shoestring. And I'm piecing this thing together. And I log on to the call, and my boss is in the call. I can see that he's in there in our little digital platform. And I say, oh, Phil's on. I'm sending the slides as I'm logging into the call, total haphazard. No response. Okay. Just wait a little bit, wait for him to get on. Get a text. He's like, hey, Phil, really sorry for the late notice. We had a plumbing emergency at my house, and I need to push your review. The weight that was lifted from my shoulder, just I was about to give this total half-ass presentation. And
Did you go to this man's house and do a gnarly number two?
I did not. I did not. And this was sent from the heavens. This deuce was sent directly from God.
Hashtag brand new sentence. Well, that's good. I'm glad something good happened today because
yeah,
that's the kind of luck you need after what transpired over the weekend.
Yeah, it was a rough one. I am postponing the inevitable because we gotta talk about this. But if you're finding us for the first time, we are Seriously Loco. We are actually a podcast about a soccer team, El Paso Locomotive FC, not a podcast about my boss's plumbing. But on this occasion, it needed to be discussed. You can find us on any major podcast platform that you listen to, and you can find us on social media at Seriously Loco on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us on Patreon, where we've got a couple of pieces rolling over there. So we've got little breakdowns of each of the first three matches. As painful as it might be to relive those, if you're trying to get a perspective of why each of those results happened, I've done my level best to try to provide some perspective. So
I have to say your latest tactical takeaway was my favorite by far. It really helped me understand what I saw without, it was extensive, but very digestible at the same time.
Thank you. Yeah, this last one of the Detroit game does, just fair warning, include the first 1,000 words of it are about only the first goal that Locomotive conceded. So it is a thick read, I guess, in that way. But I think the first goal demonstrated a lot of points that I was trying to make on the second and third as well. So it's just like,
Sure.
I decided to just go kind of frame by frame of that first goal, because it feels like it was, just kind of indicative of things that are going on in the squad right now. But yeah, if you're trying to make sense of things, our Patreon is patreon.com/seriouslyloco. Check it out. It's $2 a month if you want to become a patron. And that'll get you access to articles right away. But never fear, like, if you're like, hey, I don't want to like front up, no big deal, because all the content that's on there becomes available for everybody after a couple of days. So for example, this article will go live for everybody on Wednesday. So yeah, that is that. So yeah, I guess that is the admin handled, more or less. I guess, Mikka, do we have to dive into this now?
We do, especially because Christian's not here, so we don't get the extra distraction of Christian's question.
Right.
Maybe we'll make him do that if and when he signs on a bit later, but I guess, yeah, I guess we got to dive in.
A palate cleanser at some point. The Seriously Loco match review. For those listening in, Locomotive dropped their third straight to open the season, a 3-1 loss to Detroit City FC at Southwest University Park. I mean, in terms of the overall sort of impressions from this game, Mikka, I guess in context, obviously a third straight loss at home to open the season, there's really no super positive way to spin that. But in terms of coming away from the game, it felt like the general feeling was more so of frustration, in that, like, it just didn't have to be this way.
Yes, I think that I think there's similar themes, certainly. I think conceding early is one of them that, is what's causing the frustration among the fan base. Lackluster defending, you could say. Individual mistakes, moments where we concede rather than like from sustained patterns of play from our opposition, so to speak. So yeah, I don't want to be completely down on Locomotive, because what I said this to some colleagues in the press box at the end of the game is, like, I feel like we are addressing what needs to improve with each match, but not addressing it all at once such that it would lead to a win. And yeah. I mean, you can say, well, at least that's progress, but in the meantime, it hurts. I'm not gonna lie, and it's frustrating, and it's depressing, and it's the absolutely worst way you could start. And I know this is hurting Brian and the staff and the players for sure.
And when you take into account just how last season started, 5 straight losses to open the season in all competitions. It was brutal. And I think most Locomotive fans are thinking, like, well, it couldn't possibly be worse. And it isn't technically yet, but I mean, there is now a very real possibility of that sort of similar start, which soured so much of, like, the rest of the season, because it's hard to bounce back from a start like that.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about it in the lead up to opening night, is you don't want to get into a hole early because it's very hard to climb out of. Now, granted, the bare minimum, as we've heard from Brian Clairhout, as we've heard from Andrew Forrest, is making the playoffs, because you really have to try not to make the playoffs in this new format. But there will be teams that are on the outside looking in, and we don't want to be that again. But yeah, it's tough for sure.
Well, in terms of how Locomotive started this one from a personnel perspective, unchanged at the back. So Diaz, Navarro, Pavkovich, Yuma, Hines. That is the back five, as it were, including the goalkeeper. Liam Rose and Eric Calvillo start in central midfield. So unchanged there. Denys Kostyshyn starts again. Josue Aron Gomez gets a start up top again. But the two changes from the
Colorado game.
Jeez, these losses are really hurting. Chris Garcia and Lucho Solignac came in for Emmanuel Sinupe and Ricardo Zacharias, respectively. And I mean, as far as lineups go, I think the Sinupe Garcia change is like they each have sort of their like positive characteristics and kind of they offered slightly different things. But with Lucho reintroduced it into the lineup, and this is no disrespect to Ricardo Zacharias whatsoever, but with Lucho reintroduced, it does start to feel a little bit closer to what Brian Clairhout would call maybe his best 11.
I think so. I mean, I think first name on the team sheet obviously is Lucho Solignac. I asked Brian this after the game because I was curious myself. You know, I asked him, you know, you've shuffled the pack a lot this week. Is that more about managing minutes because you have a game every 3 days, or are you still trying to find your best 11? And he was pretty forthright that it's a bit of both. And I think it's good in a way that everyone's getting a chance, but also that cohesion. I think after 3 games, we still don't really know.
Yeah.
Which pieces work together the best, that best 11. So
Sure.
But to be fair though, I thought Chris Garcia, I mean, it's the most that he's ever played for us in one match. I think he ends up getting 57 minutes. I thought he was quite good. I think we've come to expect him to like kill off games, draw fouls and things, but he was driving forward with the ball, completed half his dribbles. He looked good going into space and trying to be more penetrative, which I think we've kind of lacked a little bit, which there are questions about that and tactics and things, but I thought he was good. And then who else came in that was new? I think that was it, really.
Just
right?
Lucho and Chris, yeah. And then we do have an enforced change sort of on at halftime for Nick Hines, like goes out injured, and Eder Borelli makes his first appearance of the season.
Right. We'll get on to Nick Hines. Lots of talking points about him from the listeners, it would seem. So
lots of discourse. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I feel like you're on to something there with like where, you know, still looking for what combinations of players work well together. And we are finding out, I would say, like, which players are good, but we're not necessarily finding out who's good together, like in those combinations. Mm-hmm. Denys Kostyshyn, probably the one who is separating himself just in terms of like the quality he offers. And, you know, I think there were questions from us in terms of like his rate of return in Ukraine and like some of these other items, but he looks like the real deal.
Yeah, he does. And he scores the lone goal for Locomotive in this one. I think that's also like a conundrum too, right? Is because Kostyshyn is a 10 ostensibly. I mean, Brian refers to him as like a false 10, which is interesting because that that would suggest to you that he has a midfield role to play, but then you have to accommodate that with the rest of your selection, right? So
sure.
Yeah, he and Lucho, I think, are like they pick themselves, right? But yeah, it's interesting that, you know, 3 games in and we still kind of don't really know, but I do chalk that up to a bit of circumstance because we had 3 games in a week.
Yeah.
So thanks, USL. Cheers.
Yeah. And I honestly, I did want to talk a little bit about that, the 3 game week to start the season. There is something particularly cruel about a 3-game week to start the season for a team with a brand new manager, a handful of new attacking, well, actually a handful of new players that they're betting in across like the starting 11. Yeah, there's a time, I think like a couple of years ago, I'm thinking, I guess 2021. So Mark Lowry's third season, I would have loved to see Locomotive play a 3-game week right out of the gate when everybody else is trying to like come to grips with their new teams and stuff. Cause we basically returned the entire squad and the same manager. Like we played the exact same system year over year. Like there was no question about like who was going to be important to the team, all this stuff. Like there was no figuring out going on. I would have killed for a 3-game week to open the season because we probably would have won all 3 of them. And there's something particularly cruel about like throwing a manager and a group of players who are trying to find their way into 3 like tough games right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, they're professionals, and it's not an excuse, but it is a reason. It is a reason for sure. And they've not been able to even look at video, really, to my understanding, because they have to prepare and recover for the next game. So that's the thing too, is like these adjustments tactically and to the shape and personnel wise are being made like with the next game in mind. Like it's just all coming so thick and fast for them. Now they do have some time now to decompress a little bit from that ridiculous opening week. A disappointing one, but one that they can take a lot to learn from. I guess that is the one like slight positive, but yeah. 0-3, and I guess we should talk about how that actually happened.
Yeah. Well, the game gets going, and it's one of those where coming out of the Colorado Springs game, you're thinking the one thing that Locomotive need to do is get out of the first, 10 minutes. Like, don't concede a goal early again. Let them grow into the game. And unfortunately, it is an early goal for the visitors. Big switch from, I believe, Michael Bryant plays the initial like big cross-field pass to Reese Williams, who unfortunately he's allowed to take the ball down like right just inside of the penalty area. Checks onto his right foot because Reese Williams was playing left back, but he typically plays as the right back for Detroit City. He was put out there due to, I think really an underperformance from Cy Goddard, who they had kind of like pegged as the guy who was going to play that position. Plays across in towards, I believe it's Ballard, but it comes off of the head of Yazid Matthews straight to Connor Rutz, who was the makeshift right back. He's a striker, basically, but felt at home in the box, and his cross shot combo deflects off of Yuma and into the back of Locomotive's net. And yeah, Detroit City go 1-0 up from basically like one of their first like true forays forward. And there was something just familiar about conceding a goal from wide areas, which is just like what Locomotive have done. I guess 3 out of the 4 goals they've conceded have come, or sorry, 3 of the 4 goals they had conceded up to that point when the Rutz chance goes in are basically from those same kind of wide areas.
Yeah, this goal, it feels like no one senses the danger until it's too late. And I find that really disturbing because there are some experienced players on this pitch and in this sequence that no one really deals with the threat. And like you said, it's a simple diagonal ball to the far side, and as the cross comes in, the defending from Locomotive is way too static. There's a couple guys watching the ball rainbow over their heads, and Rutz is able to just slam it home, and it ricochets off Yuma in particular, like this is not to dig him out, but it's just more of an observation. Yuma starts running towards Reese Williams when Navarro, Pavkovic, and Kostyshyn are already on that far side. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know what that means. Like, does that mean you don't trust them to deal with it, or I don't know? And then someone starts to run past his shoulder, so he starts to check back yet again and go towards the near post where Nick Hines is dealing with Ruts alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately it's Yuma who's there when the goal goes in off of him. So it's just seeing our most senior defender seemingly all over the place in a goal in the 8th minute it's indicative of like what's going on here. That's not to single him out. It's just to say that like systemically this is not working. And I think questions do have to be asked just about the focus in those opening minutes and in minutes where the game is going to be stopped, like heading into halftime, heading into extra time, conceding a lot of goals in these windows. And it just throws our game plan out before we can ever really settle. And I know that's got to be frustrating for Brian and for the players. But yeah, this opening goal is just way too static, way too disorganized. Ruts gets a lucky bounce, let's be honest. It does come off Yuma and in. Because I think if Benny Diaz was just alone there, probably defending that post, he'd at least get a paw to it. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the most dangerous shot in the world. Yeah. You expect a keeper to save at their near post, but yeah, just too much here that just doesn't look right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the goal comes from, as you said, Nick Hines is out there kind of, dealing with a couple of threats, unfortunately, in the lead up to that goal. And so questions inevitably coming in just due to the fact that it seems like a lot of goals are coming from that right hand or that left hand side of Locomotive's defense. So at One Star Galileo on Twitter asks, do you all agree that Hines is just not cutting it? Borelli needs to be starting more often. I've also noticed Yuma has had some costly mistakes more than usual. Is this a concern? So I think we've addressed that first part, maybe that it is a concern in terms of maybe on the mentality side. But at NG Nick Go on Instagram said, seems Nick Hines has struggled so far this year. Lots of goals from his side. Lack of a partnership with Yuma on that side. Why isn't Adair playing? Should he be? So, I mean, in terms of the Nick Hines question, I guess the first question is, are we laying, I guess, the goals at Nick Hines's feet, so to speak? And if so, like, are you in favor of trying Adair from the start more frequently, or would you stick with Hines?
I mean, there's a moment later in the game where we see why, or we see what Hines can bring, which is like an extreme burst of pace.
Yeah.
He tees Lucho Soloniak up for the shot that Lucho takes just inside the D, really, that cannons off the post. And so, again, just not getting the bounce there. However, Nick, I don't know, your piece really helped me understand what's going on here. Because, if you're just taking it at face value, it looks like Nick's getting isolated a lot, and which he is. And sometimes it's about him not stopping the cross or maybe tripping over himself or whatever. But I think in this one, this game against Detroit is where you really see the systemic flaws in the fact that, like, he probably has one too many runners to track at all times and is having to make decisions on the fly about who to go to, and being put in tough spots, really, because there's not that extra midfielder next to him. And so I think that's why we kind of talked about we probably want a 3, in midfield. Yeah. But as for the Borelli question, I mean, I think Edo Borelli is the superior player, on the evidence that we have past couple seasons. He's been on the bench. He's, he hasn't been preferred to Nick, but it's interesting because our colleague Joe from The Striker and from ESPN asked Brian, what did you think of Eder's game? What did he give you? Because he does come on in the second half, and Brian himself made it a point to, compare him to Nick. And so all that to say, like, Brian's not stupid. Like, he sees what's going on here and how perhaps he can shuffle the deck and see what another player will give him in that position. And to be fair to Eder, like these were his first minutes of the game, and he didn't necessarily light the world on fire. In fact, he's got the really terrible header for Maxi Rodriguez's goal, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
I mean, he does everything he can, but the header's just right to the native San Antonio striker, and that's game. So, maybe Eder should be playing. Maybe Nick should be on the bench, not because he's like an awful player, but maybe because confidence might be low given what's happened. And sometimes that's the best thing for a player is to take him out of the firing line. But I don't envy having to make that decision. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think the way I put it on Twitter was like my thinking's evolved on Nick Hines, and it's just because in the moment, especially when we conceded another goal from an area where I'm like, Nick should be there, right? Mm-hmm. In that moment in the game, I'm like, okay, the Foster turning him inside out in game 1, similar sort of goal given up in game 2, on the Enriquez goal, and then this goal now of Rutz is in space and able to get this shot away. To me, it's like, and to anyone watching, you're thinking like, okay, a lot of goals are coming from that left side of our defense. Like there must be something going on. And as I watched it, like as you said, I think Nick, especially on this first goal, Nick is faced with, he's tracking Rutz, like, which should be his defensive assignment. Like that, in theory, like that is the guy that he should be marking because that's the wing back on his side. And the dilemma starts when infield from him, like further, like closer to the goal, I believe it's Ballard. It's tough to tell, like on the broadcast. I believe it's Ballard is making a run because Simonson and Matthews are on the far side, like, and are occupying basically like 4 Locomotive players just like between the two of them. Yeah. Which is like part of the problem in and of itself. You mentioned it. Yuma gets attracted to that side. Calvillo is tracking Simonson's run and then hands Simonson off to Yuma. But that leaves Ballard and Rutz for just Nick. And so Nick should stick with Rutz, but he can't because as Williams checks back onto his right foot to deliver that cross in, he's aiming the cross at Ballard, who is unmarked in the penalty area. No one is near him, and he plays this flat ball that is like designed to go, straight to Ballard. Nick makes the decision in the moment to take that step towards Ballard, who is, again, unmarked in the penalty area. And in doing so, inadvertently gives Rutz the space after the deflection, like finds him. Nick is now out of the play. But until you notice that moment of, okay, Locomotive have allowed 5 Detroit City players into the penalty area, and we're only marking 4 of them, like that's at the heart of like, okay, someone hasn't tracked their runner like back and handed them off to anyone, right? Because Eric tracked Simonson and like hands him off, but no one's tracked Ballard. And so the extra man like that Locomotive needed in that moment is Liam Rose. And he is like 10 yards away from where he probably should be. And again, like, I'm not trying to dig out individual players, but I'm saying assignment-wise, Locomotive have an issue of playing with 2 midfielders who are being asked to know the difference about when to attack and when to go and when to drop back, when to press, when to drop off, all this stuff. I think there's an issue of we're asking the players to make a lot of decisions in the heat of the moment, and especially this early on in adopting a new system, that is proving difficult for these guys, and they are like having trouble. And it's not to say they're like dumb or they're like not capable of it. It's just they are trying to learn a new system and learn which decisions are the right decisions to make. And unfortunately, so far, they're learning that they're making some wrong decisions by conceding goals. Like that's they're not learning that in training. They're learning it by they're giving up goals. So I think that is where the addition of a 6 in midfield simplifies the decision making process, because that 6 knows that they're always that 5th marker. Like their job is always to be that additional guy when the defense is outnumbered. And right now we don't really have that structure for these guys to operate on.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm going to repeat myself because I think it bears repeating. But once again, though, like even though they are learning new tactics, and even though maybe we don't have a shape that's helping at the moment necessarily, I still think when that diagonal ball gets played, you need to understand that you're in danger, because that's when Detroit start making runs, and we're just jogging back.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, is what's not good enough. I think professionals need to know that regardless of what Brian Clareheart says on the training pitch, in video sessions, like, that was a dangerous moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think we realized it. Well, we didn't realize it until it was too late. So I just think there's like an IQ, like we need to get up to speed, right?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how else to say it, but just to recognize when you're in danger.
Yeah.
And you can react to it better. So
yeah, if the opponent's wingback is taking touches in your box, like odds are there's about to be concern. Like, and if nothing else, you know that everybody's going to be crashing looking for a cross. Like they're going to flood the area. As if he's brought the ball down and is now looking for a cross, they're going to crash. And so if you're involved in the play whatsoever, like you should also be sprinting back.
And Brian talked last time out about maturity. Just another reason, another instance of where we lacked it, I think. So
I think the moral of the story here on the defensive question, and like Nick Hines in particular, is not like, I don't know that like bench Nick Hines and suddenly stop conceding goals. I think like there is a team like defense mentality, structure, like all that stuff needs to be better across the board, like not just in one player.
Yeah.
Now, that goal aside, the next about 40 minutes of the game, well, I guess about 50 minutes of the game, but most of the first half and a decent chunk of the second, from about 20 minutes on, Locomotive looked far, far better, and they do get the equalizer relatively quickly, which was encouraging because we talked about lack of response to going behind early against Colorado Springs. That was remedied in that the team definitely responded, and Denys Kostyshyn opens his account for Locomotive with a really smart header that came from a good bit of play and combination between Mark Navarro and Josue Ron Gomez.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a nice ball. I don't know if it's Gomez to Navarro, Navarro to Gomez, the other way around, where it's just clipped over top of I think Reese Williams or whoever that wingback is on that side for Detroit. And it's just plays like that where you're taking folks out of the game. That's what's going to get us into these good areas to make chances, and it happens to work out on this one. We talked last time about how maybe we're not even getting the luck. There is a bit of luck in this one because Josue Aaron Gomez's cross deflects off that Detroit defender, and it's into Kostyshyn's path. 17th minute, bang, header. It's a good goal for sure. We respond quickly, and this phase of play from Locomotive where we immediately were on the front foot and trying to answer the questions is why I said at the beginning of the show that it seems like we're taking stock of like what we didn't do in the previous game before and addressing it. It just hasn't been enough to win. Yeah. So I will give credit to Locomotive for that, for, responding, because 8th minute, like, here we go again, right? You could have easily just not done that. Mm-hmm. And Kostyshyn just showing his quality and why he's, been involved in every game so far.
Yeah, glad to see him open his account too. I mean, you could see what the goal meant to him.
Yeah.
And in the celebration, I think I don't think it's overstating it to say that from the equalizer to halftime is actually where, in a strange way, like this is gonna sound weird, but this is where Locomotive lose the game actually, because they were so dominant from 20 to 45 at the very least. Like they came out in the second half, I thought pretty decent, but from 20 to 45 minutes, that is where like there is a very real scenario in which Locomotive go into halftime 2-1, at least 3-1 potentially up. And I think that actually made the difference in the game, in that in our best spell of the game, we didn't actually take advantage.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one of the like prevailing issues that we've talked about like over the years, really, not just this season, is like lack of killer instinct, like lack of ruthlessness when we need it. And I mean, I'm not trying to be revisionist. I know we scored a lot more goals under Hutch. I almost treat season 4 as like an anomaly though, because it's unlike anything we've ever seen. He did say he was going to do that. He definitely did. But you know, what's going on now, and again, just 3 matches that we have to talk about, but what's going on now we've seen before, where like 60% possession, 22 shots, like 1 big chance, and that big chance is missed.
Yeah.
Lucho Soloniak hits the post in his first start, and, you know, he said in the post-match, you know, this is the life of a striker, right? Like, yeah, luck is part of the game, but also maybe Detroit just defended really well, and, you know, I have to respect Lucho for that, in saying that, and
yeah.
And that is something that I want to bring up, too, on the Detroit City side, is seeing them defend as a team and really like put their bodies on the line. Like, I don't think I've seen that from any opponent at the Swap. You know,
yeah,
I don't have a great memory, but like it's very impressive what the amount of buy-in that Trevor James has from this playing group, in that like they were just blocking everything, and it was just so impressive. Because I mean, that's stuff that you see from like some of the better sides in Europe, right? Where like they know that, okay, maybe we don't have all of like the attacking talent in the world, but we're gonna be so hard to play against, and then we'll take our chances on the counter. Yeah. And that's exactly what Detroit City did. But like the amount of block shots they had was incredible. Like every one of them are willing to put their body on the line, and I don't know that Locomotive does that. I don't know that that's necessarily our identity anyway, but it was just impressive. And I mean putting their body on the line, I don't mean sliding in, because they weren't doing that, but like turning away from the ball, being in the right positions, knowing where the shot's going to come from, and blocking it. Yeah. So Steinwasser, great goalkeeper, but maybe didn't really have to do that much work, actually.
I was trying to look for how many shots they actually block. 9.
That seems, but like triple the clearances that we had.
Yeah.
Like almost. Maybe I'm being a little, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but like they grafted.
They did. Yeah, they did have almost triple the clearances. 31.
There we go.
To 13. Yeah, I mean, tackles, interceptions, blocks, clearances, and saves, like they had all of those in advantage over Locomotive. So it was like a heroic defensive performance in some ways, like from Detroit. I think you talked about putting their body on the line, like just really playing defensively as a unit. And Sean Spence, who runs a blog called Words About Shapes, which is a Detroit City blog, put it in a very like good way. Like Detroit City suffered well in that period where Locomotive were like well on top. He didn't, write off like, they never stood a chance or anything like that. It's like, no, we were under pressure big time.
Under the proverbial cosh.
Under the cosh, but they wear it well in terms of like, they don't feel completely like out of the game. Whereas I think Locomotive, like if there's a lesson they can learn from this game, I think, or from these first 3 games, it's that like in USL, you do have to suffer well, like to be a good team. There are going to be times where you're not the better side, like
game state,
or there's going to be that odd chance that you give up, like, and mentally you just always have to be switched on because like this game, like no team ever waltzes through 90 minutes without conceding something, right?
Right.
Like it's very rare to see a team completely dominate from start to finish. And in USL, like least of all, like there are rarely games where a team dominates start to finish. You have to like be able to be strong enough in those moments. And the thing is that Detroit had to weather a lot more than us in terms of like what we created was far like more dangerous and better in terms of quality than what Detroit created. But they weathered it, like, and they wore the, they wore the suffering well. And Locomotive so far this season, they don't suffer well. Like when they're suffering, they are down bad.
We suffer in the worst way. Oh my God.
So, I do want to talk though about the fact that like one of the things that we've spoken about in the past is like, man, it really feels like we don't do well against back threes, and Detroit sets up in a back 3. We found a way to start getting at them, and it really came through the wide areas. Like for the first, the goal comes from Gomez getting out wide in behind Reese Williams, and linking up with Navarro. The next best chance of the game, or I guess the best chances come either through Chris Garcia down the left, in behind Connor Rutz, or the best chance, as you said, the Lucho Soloniak chance, which I think, does it not take a deflection prior to, like, I feel like it's actually blocked. I think it's a deflection off of the defender onto the post, but it happens so quick, it's tough to tell.
That might have been Lucho's point, is like, it was good defending, maybe I'm not lucky, but maybe we gotta credit Detroit. But yeah, so what a pick out though by Nick Hines. And that's
the it's a nice interchange between Chris Garcia and Nick Hines, and Hines absolutely rapid to be able to even reach the ball, because it looked like the pass was actually overhit.
Yeah, it looked like it was going out.
He covers 20 yards in about a second. It felt like he got there against all odds, and plays a wonderful cross, like hammered into the feet of Lucho, who controls it well and looks like he's going to score the goal to take the lead, but hits the junction of the crossbar in the post.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about how we were able to get at a back 3 at first, and I think it's actually a peculiarity about Detroit City, maybe. I mean, I don't know. We'll see as we face more back 3s, but in a lot of back 3s, you'll see the wing backs push on and the center backs get wider and become those like full backs ostensibly. I think Detroit, their center backs tend to just stay in the width of the area, it would seem. And so I think that's why we were getting the space, is that half space became available to get into, on top of the fact that there were just some really nice plays down those wings where we were taking them out of the game. Passing the ball around the wing back, passing it over them, lobbing it over them, whatever the case may be, especially for the opener, of course. So yeah, that was encouraging, because I think in previous we have not had an answer per se.
Yeah. No, I think I think seeing the response, seeing what we were able to create was encouraging. Now, I will say there were a couple of moments where Detroit were definitely feeling the pressure, in terms of there's some like rough moments in Locomotive's press where they give the ball away quite easily, especially like right after the goal. And Locomotive should probably do better to deal with that. I actually wanted to mention a question that we got in this moment because we talked about the interplay of like Gomez getting in behind. We talk about Nick Hines getting in behind, Chris Garcia getting in behind, and playing these like interchanges on the wings rather than, and this is, I think, what at SG Contulis on Twitter was referring to is, quote, lob it into the box and hope something happens, a viable game plan. It feels like we are afraid of challenging the defenders. That said, Denys looks great. So Kostyshyn love, but I think what he's referring to is we do in this match play quite a few deep crosses, and I think we talked about it against Colorado Springs as well, where the team and it is particularly like I guess in a lot of cases against Colorado Springs it was Mark Navarro, but like receiving the ball and then playing a rather like across from a rather deep position in towards the area, and Locomotive for having, you know, some size in the team, all that sort of stuff, like attacking, we've just never been like a big aerial threat team. And Lucho's probably a great example of a guy who is pretty big, but definitely would rather have the ball at his feet than on his head.
For sure, yeah. I mean, he's one of those that like could be pigeonholed as a hold-up man, but that's not him at all. I don't know. I mean, lob it into the box and hope something happens. I feel like that's a little like dismissive of what we're trying to do, and I see what Steve's saying, to be fair. But I don't know. Like, I almost think that there is it's hard to say. Maybe I'll ask Brian this the next time I get an opportunity. But I almost think the crossing is not because we want to create a goal from the cross, but create a goal from the second phase. Because I see us take long throws sometimes too, and that's definitely not to score from. That's because you want to get the ball in the second phase in a good area, have people kind of caught out and score, right? So that's just my theory. I'll have to check that, but him saying that it feels like we are afraid of challenging the defenders, I can see that. I can see why that might be what you think of, because really, like, again, like, we're not getting like those incisive through balls necessarily from midfield. Midfield's been very like, except for Kostyshyn, who I think is kind of, to call him just a midfielder, I think is a little regressive actually, so I'll put him aside, but Calvillo and Rose haven't really been like playmaking, as it were, and putting wingers in to where they can go one-on-one and try to beat a man. So I think there is credence to that. But yeah, it's to answer the actual question, like, no, lob it in the box is not a viable game plan, like long term, if that's all we're doing. And I can see the concern of like that's what it looks like, but again, like midfield construction, like we're harping on it, but I think like the chance creation is really not coming from there. So yeah,
I mean, I think we talked about it last week where it's like those crosses from deep, you're kind of looking for a knockdown, and all of a sudden, like, you're not going to score direct from them that often. And so it's I think so. Locomotive, it is worth acknowledging that Locomotive play 30 crosses on Saturday night, which does feel like a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. but I do think I think like the moments where Locomotive were most dangerous should illustrate to the players, and hopefully like they can talk about this in film this week, is like, hey, when we take the time to get the ball down and play a 1-2 and get like 10 yards further up the pitch rather than play, because like the throw in that Nick Hines, the chance that Nick Hines creates is from a throw in, and Nick Hines receives the ball on that far sideline in an area where he absolutely he could have just like put his head up and just whipped it in to the area, right? And just like seen what happened. He opts to play a 5-yard pass to Chris Garcia, which enables like this whole move to take place.
Right.
And I think at a certain point, there are times where we should like choose the harder option sometimes. And like, hey, can we play through them? Can we play around them? rather than like, yeah, going kind of direct to the box and hoping it, you know, again, I don't know that it's a hope. It's like it is an easy way to get the ball in the box and cause chaos. And like, you know, USL defenses typically like can struggle with like that sort of thing, you know, if it starts bouncing around. I think we've played teams that aren't really going to be frazzled by that. In terms of like, we've played two of the like probably best organized sides in USL period in Sacramento and Detroit. And so playing a lot of crosses like isn't necessarily going to rattle them. And I think there is an element of learning that I hope goes on of our best chances are coming from playing football, and not necessarily like looking for that first option of getting the ball in the box. So
yeah.
Well, things go downhill for Locomotive from there. In the second half, Nick Hines is replaced by Eder Borelli, and despite Locomotive starting decently in the second half, I would say, and they had looked the more likely team to score for quite a long time by this point, I think a similar sort of thing happens that we talked about with Colorado Springs and their winner, in that it happened half an hour earlier than the Colorado Springs situation. But we have a moment where the tide starts to turn a little bit, where we're no longer on top and we are under a little bit of pressure, and Yazid Matthews has a chance about a minute before he scores the goal. He has a chance that he drags narrowly wide. That is absolutely the warning shot for Locomotive of, hey, Detroit is back in this game 100%, and like maybe the chance has gone for you to go all out to win it type deal. And you know, not much later, it's a turnover in midfield. Probably an argument to be made about whether there's a foul there. But ball given away, couple of passes into the feet of Yazid Matthews, and it's in the end like a pretty simple finish. And so for all that toiling, you know, where we're talking about 40 minutes of total game time of Locomotive being like well on top, creating chances, doing all this like hard work, then is undone like in this kind of split second where Detroit, who has had essentially one shot in that time, and it came a minute ago, like now winning the game. So, or, you know, on top of Locomotive, and it felt like the air really like went out of the side when that goal went in.
Yeah, nice finish from Yazid Matthews, to be fair. It's I just don't know how many goals like this we're going to concede where someone in Locomotive Blue is on the floor. And that's not to say that like there haven't been fouls, but this one doesn't get called again, and it just looks awful, right? Like when the person that loses the ball is on the ground when the goal is scored. I just want to say that it just looks bad. I'm not saying it is or isn't a foul. I'm not really sure. I think if a gun to my head, like the player just nicks in really well and gets the ball from Ben Zvafkovits. Trying to play it into Lucho Solignac. And I think what's more egregious for me, though, than even that, is how much time Leland has to turn and find Matthews flying down that right flank. Where is the counter-pressing? Right? Like, as soon as you lose the ball, you should be trying to get it back immediately.
Yeah.
Because, as Brian told us, most goals are scored within 10 seconds of winning the ball back, and that is certainly what happened here.
It took like 4 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were clinical with some of these finishes. This one, maybe the pick of the lot, I guess. But, yeah, Leland turning, looking up, taking a couple touches, saying, oh, there's my guy. Great pass, to be fair, but he's not challenged. So, I mean, do we just not counter-press anymore? I'm not sure. I would think that, you know, based on what we know about Brian's career and kind of his influences, that we would see some of that, but there was none of that on this goal, and I think that's super frustrating.
Both these goals to me, and I harped on it in the piece, which you can still read on Patreon. Just do the
Just
shameless
saying.
plug. Yeah. Something I talked about is like all three of these goals to me scream like out for a 6, like, and maybe are less likely to happen. And I think this one is the most obvious one because there's two aspects of this goal that to me say if a defensive midfielder is in this side, like we probably don't concede this goal. And I think the first is Bensay's obviously trying to advance the ball up the field, so he does get a little greedy, like in trying to play this pass to Lucho. But I also don't think he has great options, like in midfield, and no one's really like turning and offering, like an option for him to play the pass out of defense. And technically, we have a double pivot in Eric Calvillo and Liam Rose, so both of them, I guess, should be offering for the ball, like should be showing for the ball because they're supposed to be the ones like turning and playing it further upfield. So Bensay dribbles a little bit. We've seen success like when he's got, I mean, the goal against Colorado Springs comes from his foray forward. But I think in this case, like having an option in that 6th position, he probably doesn't feel forced to play this pass into the feet of Lucho. Now, if he still makes that decision, fine. But the other aspect of the goal is that time in midfield that you mentioned for Leland to turn, like, I feel like if there's a 6 in there, that's exactly where he'd be standing. Like, if you drew it up, it's like that's where he would have been. And they play it into a space like just where he is just behind our two midfielders. Like he's just goal side of the two guys who like would mark him in our system. So that's, I think like the counter pressing question is totally fair. And I think like there's something to be said for, I think it just like shows that right now, like the spacing, the assignments, all that stuff, like it's just not, guys aren't in the position like where they need to be to do what we're asking them to do. And I think he has that time because like we have now there is absolutely like individual fault with the players because I guarantee you it's not drawn up to like, hey, we give the ball away and they get to play in between the lines by default. Like that's not like how it's drawn up, I'm sure. And so I think there is like player culpability for sure, but it's just God, it was just such a frustrating goal to give up. One, because of the timing, and because it is again a goal that resembles goals that we've already conceded, which like this early in the season we shouldn't have like that many examples of like lose the ball in midfield. We have 3 now where it's like we gave up the ball and immediately conceded. Like the Sacramento goal is an example of both our wing and like turnover goals, and then Colorado Springs winner was a giveaway, like that giveaway quick counter. This one a much shorter distance, but quick counter after a midfield giveaway, and that is just like it's just showing the blueprint to everybody. As we talked about in the Colorado Springs game, it's like they know they can get us out wide. It's like, well, now teams definitely know that they should press the absolute hell out of our midfield because if they win the ball back, like they've got a real good chance at getting in.
We're saying 6 so much on our podcast and in our Patreon writings that we're going to cause another satanic panic, but we really just want a defensive midfielder, I promise.
Or Drake is going to show up.
The 6 god. No, yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said there. It's scary how many like blueprint goals we've given up that are just fodder for other teams' video analysis department, right? And that's the thing is like we're not, people are not earning their goals at Southwest University Park. They are certainly earning their clean sheets at, i.e. like defensive performances. Like they're definitely earning that where they're denying us, but the goals that are getting scored, no, like it's just mistakes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want to. I mean, I think you really said it perfectly, so I don't want to delve too much into that. But yeah, we're just not letting. I mean, Brian said something about like he wished that we would just get smashed because at least that makes sense, like we would. Yeah. If we were getting smashed and just dominated, like it would make sense how much we concede, but with the way that we're playing, it's not. And that's why stats can be so. They don't tell the whole story, especially when it comes to Locomotive. And I'm seeing a lot of like non-Locomotive media talking about our start. And I would just caution because like I really don't think it tells you a lot unless you're watching us. Mm-hmm. So yes, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a results business, so we're not getting the results, but it really isn't telling the whole story.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. The salt in the wound of this game is Maxi Rodriguez's goal to make it 3-1. As you said, San Antonio native, and we talked about him as like one of Detroit's quality pieces last week in the preview. Yep. Comes back to bite us, and he does grab a really good goal, but it is another, I guess, odd goal to concede in that it's just like danger not dealt with, and one of those sort of classic goals where as the ball comes back towards the top of the area, you're thinking like, well, there's only one place like that this is going, as he just arrowed it into the top corner.
I've seen some folks say, or question at least, like, is there anything Benny Diaz could have done more there? What do you think of that? Because I just feel like Maxi Rodriguez has all day to pick that corner.
That's where my mind goes, is he's not being closed down. And I feel like when you have guys basically taking shooting practice, like goalkeepers are going to be at a disadvantage. I think too, like the way that it comes about, there's probably, I think Benny's moving a lot, like in that sequence, because it obviously like it's out on the left and then it like comes back across like to the top of kind of central, like more central. So I think he's moving across his whole goal. I mean, I don't know that Benny is like free of criticism in the sense that like we have conceded a lot of goals, but I think like I think at the end of the day, like we aren't putting Benny in a lot of situations where he's like able to make saves. Like a lot of these goals we're conceding are like either from like such close range or like, or in this case, like he has such time like to pick his spot that, yeah, I mean, I don't think we're giving Benny a lot of ability to like make these saves.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it could be worse, a lot worse without him, because I think he's been outstanding on some of these set piece opportunities that we're giving up. That's another part of this Locomotive puzzle that is concerning, is set pieces. We look clueless on them, to be honest.
We're not getting to the ball first. Like no. Every set piece, like that the opposing team, defensive set piece, like the opposing team is getting ahead to it like before us.
That's a lot of USL teams' bread and butter. So like just another thing to address. But
we haven't really been punished yet, like to the extent that we could have been. Right. And as you said, yeah, Benny Diaz has made a couple of saves in those moments. He's bailed us out. And like it's worth mentioning that I think Benny Diaz like might have the best passing range of anybody on the whole team. Like he's unbelievable. His distribution is so good, and it sucks we haven't had more reason to talk about it, because he picks people out for fun. Like, and it's not just like one type of pass or anything like that. He like plays these kind of lofted balls out to the fullbacks. He'll play these like long flat like kicks off, like when he picks the ball up, and those long flat punts that he does, like, and they are on the money like every single time. He's unbelievable I mean, he talked about, we mentioned it, but preseason he said he was really good with his feet, and like he did not lie.
No, not at all. it's funny because like goalkeepers say that a lot nowadays, but like he actually has shown it. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, I think we talked about just about everything there is to talk about with this game. Unfortunately, Locomotive, the losers of 3 straight at home. I think we already talked about why it's so significant and why, why it's just tough to come back from starting a season like this. But as in all sports, hope springs eternal, and there is always another game. And in this case, it just happens to be one of the toughest games that Locomotive will likely play this season, and that's Louisville away, which we'll talk about after a quick break. The Seriously Loco match preview. Welcome back. Well, we're joined for the preview part of the podcast by Christian Canales. Christian, welcome.
Hey, thanks. It's a little awkward for me jumping in the middle, but I'm happy to be here.
You're coming on as a second half sub. It's fine.
What can I say? I'm used to going the full 90, but sometimes it just doesn't work out that way.
Life happens. Sometimes you gotta, Eder Borelli and jump in at halftime.
Sore subject.
I thought you might like that. So, well, Mikka and Christian, we've talked about the loss against Detroit, but we've got a game coming up this weekend at Louisville City, a trip to the Lynn Family Stadium. El Paso and Louisville met last season. It was a 1-0 loss, I believe, for Locomotive at the hands of Louisville City. That was in a rough stretch of games, and this one does not come at any kind of a time, unfortunately. The trip across to Louisville spent their first 2 match days on the road on the West Coast, and came away with 2 wins from 2. Orange County, they got a 3-1 win over Orange County, who I might add looked really good against Tampa Bay on Saturday night, which is mildly concerning. And Louisville also came away with a 1-0 win against Monterey Bay. And for those who remember last year, Monterey Bay actually got a win over Louisville at home. It's like 4-3 or 4-2 or something like that. Crazy game. But so Louisville coming off of 2 straight wins on the West Coast. They're back at home, and it is the home opener for Louisville. I mean, can you think of a worse possible fixture coming off of a three game like losing streak homestand, going on the road to Louisville? Like, this is literally exactly, I don't know. It's not what the doctor ordered. It's what you're like. I don't know. It's what you're like.
It's what the Grim Reaper ordered.
What your arch nemesis ordered.
No, I'm trying. My impulse is to be negative, but I'm trying to grow this season, and so I kind of liked. I think Lucho said it in the press conference that this kind of this match is going to be highly competitive for us. Competitive in that it's a difficult match, is almost preferable than to a team like, I guess this season, I think pretty much like Vegas is the only team that is down worse than us right now. So I think that a competitive match might be good because it'll help the team get a little bit more focused and just take it a little more seriously. I mean, not obviously they're professionals; they're not in a position to not take anything seriously. But I just think that when you know that you need to be almost perfect, you're just that much more locked in the week leading up to it. So I think that it can be good in that sense, that this is one that they're really going to have to show up for. And it's going to be the first match that they play with like an actual full week of preparation for. So there's some positives in here too.
Do you think Mikka, I mean, I guess in a week like this, how does Brian focus the players on being sharp in the game ahead rather than thinking about, I guess, like getting that first win, because like it feels like maybe a win on the road at Louisville is probably a stretch goal. But like, how does Brian focus the players on away from, hey, we've got to get out of this losing streak, and onto like putting in just a good performance in Louisville?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to answer your question without really answering it, because I think actually I think there's going to be some natural like time to compartmentalize these last 3 games, just by the sheer fact that we're not playing until Saturday. Hallelujah. So I think that works in Brian's favor for sure, because you just get some of that time to just mentally like disconnect from everything that's gone on. But I think Brian will be wanting to tell these players, like, look, we're going on the road to an Eastern Conference team. They're very good. It's their home opener. Like, I don't know that they need much more motivation, right? And at the same time, it could be like, yes, you know, I take Christian's point for sure that this is going to be a very competitive fixture. It's one of the, you know, USL royalty in Louisville City, to be fair. But maybe there is like not a free hit vibe to it, but like there is going to be less pressure ostensibly because they're not in front of their fans who have just seen them get rolled over 3 times in a row, right? So maybe that will work in our advantage and allow us to play a little more like, or maybe less within ourselves, I guess, or not to our full potential. So I think actually those things will come more naturally than anything Brian could say. And if I'm not mistaken, like, we weren't like an amazing like away side with Mark, but I do remember some of those away trips being like cathartic for the boys, it would seem. And so like I don't know, I remember like Real Monarchs a couple times and games like that where like it felt a little bit different because they were just away from like the pressure of, you know, their own fans. So I'm hoping that will work in our favor. But I bottom line though, I do think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I just think this is a better side, unfortunately. I mean, Joshua Winder, the Benfica-bound youngster, Cameron Lancaster scores goals for fun in this league. I don't see
his first of the season against Orange County as well.
I just don't see an obvious weakness in this Louisville side, to be honest. So
yeah, they're, I mean, super strong, and I do hate the fact that it's their home opener, like because it will be like the Lynn Family Stadium will be full, and that is in and of itself a challenge. I think it's a cool place to go. I really wish like I could make the trip, because just from a facility perspective, I think it's like clearly the best facility in USL. The other thing, so I don't love that it's the home opener. The other thing that is interesting about this game is we have the narrative of Dylan Maris, obviously plays for Louisville City now, hasn't seen a ton of minutes in the first 2 games. Actually, I don't know if he's come on in either game yet.
Got 7 minutes against OC.
Okay, came on for the tail end. Brian Ownby, who was a goal scorer against Monterey Bay, was actually also sent off in that game. And so they finished with 10 men. Ownby being suspended, I think, increases the chances that Dylan gets a start against his old club, and increases the narrative, the narrative potential of this matchup. How painful will it be to see Dylan wearing another club's colors?
It's going to be absolutely awful because I mean, I said I was going to be positive, but like just the way that the team has been performing, like he definitely has the ability to absolutely carve us up. And so that's going to be the worst part, I think, if that happens. Hopefully it doesn't. You know, hopefully they turn things around this week, but it's not a long shot to say that may happen.
I mean, I think it says a lot that Dylan Mars is at this point a depth option for Louisville City. Like, that is wild. It just shows you how stacked they are. I mean, when Dylan was wearing Locomotive blue, though, like, I think he did have a tendency to, like, grow into the season. So,
True.
like, obviously, the way our luck is, if he drops a masterclass on us, it won't be a surprise. But at the same time, like, logic would tell you, like, that shouldn't be likely. But he won't need any extra motivation, that's for sure.
Do you think he refrains to celebrate if he scores?
God, I don't know, because he's at home.
No, he will. He's a classy guy. I don't think he'll.
But they're at the Lynn Family Stadium. I think if he was at the swap, maybe he'd consider not doing that. But
so you're saying it'll be a Luis Suarez situation when he scored at the new camp against Liverpool, he celebrated and then said, "I wasn't at Anfield." Like,
yeah, I would think so. Guess we'll see.
No, that's interesting because I was like, does he do, is it the Mo Salah, like the hands up, like is it the yeah. Hopefully we don't find out. That would be the ideal situation.
Truly,
is we have no clue. I mentioned Louisville. I mean, we said they're dangerous. They have had 4 unique goal scorers across the 4 goals that they've scored in their first 2 games. So no shortage of weapons. Lancaster, Mushagalusa, McCabe, and Ownby are the scorers of their goals. We won't see Brian Ownby for this match, as I said, because of the red card suspension. But as you mentioned, Mikka, they've got all kinds of ways that they beat teams. They showed in their first 2 matches sort of a little bit more high powered, like beating a team by creating lots of chances, scoring goals, and then Monterey Bay seeing out a game with 10 men for the better part of half an hour at the end of the game as well. This Louisville side certainly they don't have one specific way where if the offense isn't clicking, they may not get it together. It's they can kind of beat you however they need to on the day.
Yeah, I think, and they've got Sean Toch at the back too, veteran, marshalling that back line. I think maybe the only question mark is in goal, because I think they are playing a new goalkeeper back there, the Frenchman, whose name escapes me right now, but only 1 goal conceded so far, so not a bad start.
Yeah, we'll get our interns on that real quick.
Semi.
Mm-hmm.
But well, I don't know. That's who played in the last game. I don't know who played in the first game.
Let's see.
They played Kyle Morton in the first game.
Interesting.
So maybe still trying to establish that number 1, I guess.
Well, obviously I think we've seen a couple of changes from Brian. We've seen a couple of games where he's tried to he went first 2 games same exact starting lineup with some built-in sort of changes throughout the game, makes a couple of changes in the last game with Garcia and Lucho coming into the side. Do you guys expect that we're going to stick with a similar look, or do you think with the week maybe we get a little bit more tinkering from Brian this time around?
He seemed like he was really interested in finding something different. He sounded like he was definitely concerned about the start of the season. It wasn't just it's the start of the season, it's rust, it'll come up that wasn't the impression that I got from him. So he's definitely appears to be looking for a way to fix things. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something a little bit different. Exactly what that is, I don't know. But I think if, since he has the week to identify, to analyze, I think that we'll see something maybe not in shape anyways, but maybe in philosophy. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think the only place that we haven't really shaken it up is in midfield. So I do wonder if we'll try to roll the dice there. I mean, obviously the selection has become a bit more difficult with the injury to Andre Aguiluth. And maybe, not wanting to throw like Lalito in right away necessarily, the 16-year-old.
I don't think we've seen him in the 18 yet either.
I don't think so, no. I mean, I imagine he'll travel, but yeah. I mean, I think Borelli will probably check in. I think that was the idea with putting him on for that half, is to at least get those minutes into his legs so that it would be sensible to start him. But of course, with actual like training going on this week, maybe players can play themselves in and out of Brian's thoughts, or train themselves in and out of Brian's thoughts, I guess. So, yeah, very, very interesting to see what lineup drops.
The question we got from Eric Bauer at eBau27 on Twitter, if you had to pick just one or two things the boys need to improve on to get a result on Saturday, what would they be?
Shot conversion. The ball just needs to go in the net. I mean, that's there's little that you can do. Like, you can't. That's not going to happen by like training this week. It's almost more of a luck thing, because I mean they've gotten better. I've seen some comments saying like, well, they need to shoot, they're not attacking, but like they took 22 shots on Saturday. Like, yeah, that's plenty of shots. And what the XG was almost 2. I think it was like a 1.8 or something. So it's just they're good shots. It's just a matter of them hitting the back of the net now. So if that's just luck, then hopefully we're just a little more lucky on Saturday.
I mean, one or two things. I think one, don't concede in the first 10 minutes. Like, if we can win the first half of the first half, like, that will be progress, right? Yeah. And I know that sounds like the bar is on the floor, because it kind of is. So yeah, just let's be solid. Let's play as a team. Let's communicate, right? Like, these are all like kind of intangible and they don't really have much to do with X's and O's, but they're important. So yeah, win the first half of the first half, and yeah, take the chances that you do get, which I don't think will be a lot, to be honest. I think Louisville are very key, like, they're very astute and they play a complete game, They're not too top heavy, they're not just defense only, like, they're very comprehensive. So whatever chances you do get, you do have to be clinical with them, kind of tacking on to Christian's point. But yeah, just those couple things.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, we talked about it earlier, Mikka, but taking a page out of Detroit's book and suffering well. Like, I think there are going to be moments in this game where we're under pressure. There's going to be times where, like, Louisville is on top, they're at home, they're going to have a full stadium, like, on their side. They're going to be amped up to play in front of their fans. And there's going to be moments where we are second best, like that's going to happen. Knowing that and responding well, like, to that, I think is like part one. And then, yeah, part two is like, be the team that you're pissed at, because they're so frustratingly clinical and so difficult to play against. Like, be that team that's hard to beat. I think, like, that's maybe when you boil it down, it's like, just be the assholes that are, like, tough to beat first, and then worry about the rest of it, as the game goes. But don't, just for the love of God, like, don't be a soft touch for one of the best sides in the USL. Like, make them fucking work for it at least.
Fair.
And like, I would love for them to come away just pissed off about, like, how tough it was for them for 90 minutes. Like, if nothing else, like, they should leave just mad about how obnoxious and like difficult the team made it. I think that will take like some doing given what we've done up to this point, but I think mentally, like, there has to be a shift from kind of expecting like danger to pass, and being dangerous, I guess. Like we're not I'd like us to be the aggressors in that way.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like if we're gonna suffer, let's suffer well. So that's fair.
Well, I guess with that, in terms of expectations out of the game, I know we haven't done the pick'em or anything like that, but we can just go like what you're expecting on Saturday, with no pressure of the game, but what are your guys' thoughts? Do Locomotive get a result on Saturday?
I don't think so. I think Louisville are well up for this, and 2 games on the road, 2 wins. That's huge. Going home to that and to your fans, to the Lynn Family Stadium. I just think it's a little big of an ask. I would absolutely take like a 0-0 Terrorismo. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not too proud.
100%.
But
100%.
I just don't see it, even with Ownby out of the side, which is a boon for us. But
yeah.
Positive Christian is, like, is my first choice is the 0-0. That's what I'm looking for.
What have we become?
So basically, if Locomotive concede, like, they're gonna lose.
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.
It is tough. I mean, like you guys said, I think it's a bridge too far for this Locomotive side at this point in the season, and I think as much as they're gonna fight against it potentially and try to, like, I think there will be a lot of conversations this week about, hey, like, those first 3 games, like, they're learning opportunities. They're not something for us to get hung up on, all this stuff, like, leave that in the past. What happened in the swap stays at the swap. But I think, like, inevitably, I think the players are going to feel a lot of pressure around, like, somehow getting a win out of this game. And I think ultimately it's going to, like, I think it's just going to be too tall of a task for where this team is at confidence wise. That's not to say that, like, there isn't quality in this team that can match up with a team like Louisville. I just think right now that quality isn't at its best level because of the combination of total lack of confidence in, like, seeing out a result, and just, like, the mental, like, haymakers they've been taking over these first 3 games.
The people want to know, and by people I mean, like, one person asked, are we doing a watch along? Are we gonna do, like, a full on, like, existential stream?
Well, I will leave it to you guys because you're
out of town.
Out of town, and I'll be unavailable. But I mean, we can boot the StreamYard up, and you guys can go for it. I won't be able to join, unfortunately, but
all right, TBD then on that.
At the very least, like, there will be live stream. Just to be super clear, like, there will be live streams this season. It is just this particular match that falls on a particular weekend, which may add more misery to a poor Locomotive result, unless they can give your humble host a gift on Saturday for his birthday.
That would be nice. Yeah, Phil's birthday's on Saturday. That's right. I
would much appreciate it. You can direct that to me at USL Sickos. No. So there will be live streams this season, and we've actually got our, like, YouTube back up. There was a weird thing with the YouTube, so the live streams will be on YouTube as well when we get those going. We will let everybody know on social media if the live stream goes down for Louisville City, but we will definitely have them for the other matches in the future. And I think, the first one I can guarantee for sure is the Union Omaha game, which Mikka won't be on stream because Mikka will be covering that game live.
Hey, yeah. More to come on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, guys, I think that's about it. Is there anything else that we need to chat about before Locomotive takes this L on Saturday?
Did you already plug your latest?
I did, but I was gonna do another round of admin plugs at the end here. So if you've enjoyed the episode, we'd really appreciate it if you give us like a subscription or a like or a follow on whichever podcast platform you prefer to listen on. And if that platform allows you to rate and review, if you drop us a 5-star review, that would be pretty cool also, just for more Locomotive fans to see / hear the podcast. And on top of that, we're on Twitter, Instagram, at Seriously Loco. We're on Facebook too. And we're on Patreon, as I mentioned, patreon.com/SeriouslyLoco, where you can still, until Wednesday morning, you can read the piece early, breaking down the Detroit City loss. From a tactical perspective, you can take a look at that. But it will open to the public on Wednesday, so everybody will get a chance to read it then. Yeah, you can catch up on everything Locomotive on our various channels. But hope everyone's enjoyed listening. Wherever you're watching the match from on Saturday, hope everyone has an otherwise good weekend. And who knows? Come Monday morning, we may be talking about a shock Locomotive win. Here's hoping. But until then, I hope everyone has a good rest of the week and stay loco.